So the recommendations are very good and have had almost no coverage with the mainstream, as has very little of the Al Jazeera's talks. However, we will hope for the better. Thank you. So after all that, I'm going to introduce Naomi first. Okay, we all know Naomi, but let's pretend we don't for a moment. After a 25-year career as a journalist, including time as Reuters correspondent in Lagos and chief correspondent in Amsterdam, Naomi switched career and became a primary school specializing in literacy. She's a life member of both the NUJ and the NEU. Her activism dates back to school days. She was a Labour Young Socialist, so was I, and then a student activist, a veteran of many trade unions, anti-racist and international solidarity demonstrations. In 2004, she joined Youth for Justice for Palestinians. She's a founding member of Jewish Voice for Labour and our media officer, and she is Jewish. Just to say it again.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Thank you, Jenny. I'm a bit worried about this microphone. Is it picking up my voice all right? It was booming a bit when Jenny was speaking. Yeah, okay. Look, first thing to say is how incredibly grateful I am and we as JVL are for all the support and overwhelming kindness that we've experienced from so many people. I mean, Jonathan and I were on a bus the other morning, Jonathan Rosenhead and I, and a complete stranger, a young delegate from Plymouth, was looking at us, and then he came over and he said, "I know who you are." And we started this lovely conversation. He was incredibly naive, young delegate who obviously had no idea why all these bizarre things were happening in the party. So goodness knows what will happen to him if he's sort of subsumed in the mass of whatever it is that goes on at conference. But things like that are happening all over, and it's wonderful that you've made the trek in this very peculiar, unfortunate weather to get here. I'll say a little bit about my suspension because obviously you'll want to know. As you know, I was elected to the National Executive Committee. The results were, thank you very much. And the results were announced probably 3 weeks ago now. And then last week on Thursday, I received a letter saying that several of you in this room have had them. Important information regarding your Labour Party membership. Actually, hands up, who's had one of those? Oh my goodness, look at that. Look at that. Isn't that ridiculous? So there we go. And we know that going on 60 of the individuals who've been investigated for crimes, often related to anti-Semitism, almost invariably, almost 60 Jewish people have experienced this over the past number of years. So anyway, I got the letter, and it said that there was an allegation, and I was administratively suspended, which means that from the moment of receiving that letter, I'm not allowed to attend any Labour Party meetings or stand for office or anything like that. And I had 14 days in which to refute the allegation that I hadn't done anything. I hadn't even said anything nice about Palestine, which, as we know, is a hanging offence in itself. But what I had done is to participate in a meeting a year ago, September the 27th, 2021, organised by some individuals involved with one of the prescribed organisations. So we're talking about an organisation which, as Jenny's mentioned, Martin Ford said, was operating a very dubious set of prescriptions, banning organisations whose views are seen to be inimical to the majority in the party, judged by the leadership. And then it is taking a year to decide that I, after having been elected to the NEC, need to be reprimanded for this breach, this alleged breach, a year earlier. So you have to ask yourself what's going on, and I think we should see what's happened to me in the context of all the other very recent suspensions and expulsions of people on the left. Whole delegations in a number of cases have just been told, sorry, you are not an acceptable member of this organisation. You are not coming to conference. So the whole of Haringey, Wood Green, and Tottenham, and Penrith, and Borders, and so on and so on. Delegations just wiped out. In the context of what we heard from the EHRC, which is a a report that we have been very critical of, but it did point out that one of the worst things that can happen in a political organisation is that the leadership intervenes in disciplinary matters. This was apparently one of Jeremy Corbyn's great crimes. Although if you watch the Al Jazeera programmes, you will see, or if you indeed pay attention to the leaked report and the Ford report and the Al Jazeera programmes, that didn't happen anyway. But it is a terrible thing. You know, disciplinary processes should be independent of the political leadership of the party. But I've been suspended at a very dubious time. A few days after being elected, a few days before the start of conference. Tomorrow night was the first meeting of the NEC that I should have been attending. And it would have been a meeting which would have set up working groups to look into implementation of the Ford report, which, as Jenny's pointed out, is very significant. So, you know, that's the context for it. Anyway, this meeting is not about me, definitely not. When we organised it, I hadn't even been elected to the NEC. When the leaflets went out, I certainly hadn't been suspended from the party. So that's not what this is about. This meeting is about where we are now as a left pro-Palestinian. I assume that's the motivation of most of you being here. In the political party that calls itself a Labour Party, and where we should be going. And I hope there are people in the audience who I think have a lot to contribute on this question. So I hope we will get some really interesting observations from them. I mean, as our leaflets pointed out, the Labour Party was created as the political voice of the organised Labour movement. Is it performing that role now? Well, I think that is very questionable. We seem to have a party which is disfigured by this awful factionalism, which the Ford report again pointed out, factional abuses whereby members' democracy is set at naught. Members are treated with contempt. Democracy is thrown out of the window almost all the time. It's extraordinary. In addition to that, it's a party which implements a hierarchy of racisms, by which we mean that various forms of discrimination that members suffer are not treated with equal seriousness. That is evident. Again, Ford has said that. How can a party which claims to be a potential party of government representing all the working people of this country, how can it possibly have any credibility if it continues to behave in that fashion? So where do we go from here? I mean, we really are in a very difficult situation. We have the most noxious Tory government. Shifting to the right so rapidly, it's disappearing off the scale. It's frightening. And I think lots of people who are not on the left, who are in the centre of politics, people who are simply concerned about human rights and civil liberties, freedom of speech, and so on, people are getting quite scared. And so they should. So how on earth do we respond as people on the left, given that we have a party that currently does not stand up to that government with any robustness? It's becoming quite alarming. We have a government, a party where priority resolutions to be discussed on the floor of conference did not include workers' rights. That seems surprising. I mean, obviously there are many other very important things, but for that to be one of the ones which is not on the floor of conference, at this time, with all the struggles that are going on, with all the trade unionists who are out there fighting, making sacrifices to protect their living conditions, their working conditions, their pay, their jobs, it's just quite bizarre. So not only that, we have a global political environment which is terrifying. And we have a Conservative government which is willing to talk war in a time when nuclear weapons, battlefield nuclear weapons, are being posited as possibly used in Ukraine. This is out of this world terrifying. I mean, I could go on and on. The success of the far right in elections in Italy and Sweden, rising right-wing movements in many parts of the world. Thanks, Jenny. I've got 3 minutes. And obviously, the planet is imploding. It's burning, it's drowning, and all these crises need to be dealt with by bold opposition. So we need a party which has the credibility to present itself as having something to offer. as Peter Oborne, the conservative journalist who is quoted very creditably in the Al Jazeera programme several times, said, if we have a leadership which is prepared to destroy democracy with its own party, to have contempt for freedom of speech in its own party, how can you trust them with government? And for people, for voters out there to have confidence in Labour, it would need to change quite dramatically. If we want to get Labour elected, we have to present it as a real alternative to the Tories. Otherwise, not only is there no reason for voters to vote for it, but there's no reason for members to stay in the party, and membership is down to below 400,000 when it was close to 600,000 when Jeremy was at his height. Why would members go out and canvass and campaign and slog for people who they know aren't going to represent the needs of the people of this country? So we need to be supporting workers' struggles unequivocally. I think the only thing that Keir Starmer seems to support unequivocally is Zionism. That's something he's on the record as supporting unequivocally. That is a difficult position to support given the situation of the Palestinian people these days. So we want a party that fights for justice, for equality, for human rights, for freedom of expression, and for international solidarity with those who are oppressed. There are movements out there doing those things all the time. There are renters' unions, there are anti-eviction campaigns, there are people defending the NHS, there are people supporting migrants, there are people waging workers' struggles, and so much more. I'm sure many people in this room will have examples that they'd like to share of struggles that are going on. People in the Labour Party should be involved with those struggles, but not only people in the Labour Party. There are many other forums for that kind of activism, and we need to find ways to bring them together. It would be nice if we had a political party that was doing that. It's a bit of a joke on Twitter when something awful happens. People say, wouldn't it be nice if we had a party which represented the interests of the people who are suffering? I wonder what that party might have been called once, you know. It's a joke. So we have a party. There are thousands of members still who want the best for the country, for the working class, for peace and justice globally. Those people, I hope I'm still going to be among them for a bit longer. I don't know whether I'll be allowed to be, but if I am, I will be fighting with them. And we need to work together with all the disparate movements around the country and try and find ways of bringing those things together with a political program that can be effective. I mean, I'd love, as a Jewish organisation, I think our priority is probably going to be to do with racism. And that's why we have prioritised that subject 2 years running at our meetings here. Last year we had an excellent speaker from Labour Black Socialists dealing with anti-black racism. And today I'm really delighted that we've got Maryam to explain to us about the impact of Islamophobia on an enormous section of our population. Sorry, am I losing you? Oh dear, thank you. No, not too bad. So I'm going to stop there. I'm sure I've gone on for more than 3 minutes since Jenny said I had 3 minutes. So I'll pass this over. Here we go. Thank you.
Before I introduce Maryam, I'm just going to make two rather simple points. One is, we don't describe ourselves as an anti-Zionist organisation. We just do not describe ourselves as a Zionist organisation. And one of the reasons for that is that we have members who still consider themselves to be Zionists. And I think Naomi appreciates that. The word can mean many things. And they can say to themselves that they support every issue we do regarding the behaviour of the Israeli government and Palestinians, but they may not actually call themselves anti-Zionist. But the one thing we all agree is that anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. That's the thing that we have struggled with for years and years. I mean, as my husband rather annoyingly says to me sometimes, but some anti-Zionists are anti-Semitic. Well, that is also a possibility. But there is no intrinsic connection between anti-Zionism. course, there are anti-Semites everywhere. Now, let's move on to something completely different, and to me at the moment, much more interesting. I'm sort of bored of of all this. Right. Like, very much welcoming Dr. Maryam Jameela. She is a writer and researcher who specializes in Islamophobia, trauma, and deconstructions of power, which you'll explain to us, I think, please. She is an editor and investigative journalist for the Canary. Her work has been published with Media Diversified, Now Then, and more. Welcome to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jenny and Naomi. So my 10 minutes is going to be quite different to Naomi's. It's going to be a bit of a crash course in Islamophobia, but Islamophobia in the current moment that Britain is in. So it's not been very long since we had a military show of force with British flags and the royal family parading their trappings around. And I think that shows us that we're far past the point where Britain can be considered a progressive society in any serious way.
Speak a bit louder.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah. Modern British politics has become about optics. It's about appearing to tackle racism whilst merrily churning out policies that further disenfranchise communities of colour. There's been a long and complex discussion about how Islamophobia and anti-Semitism are not being tackled meaningfully by the major political parties. The thing is that white supremacy has been missed in this discussion. In Charles Mills's Racial Contract, he writes, "White supremacy is the unnamed political system that has made the modern world what it is today. Though it covers more than 2,000 years of Western political thought and runs the ostensible gamut of political systems, there will be no mention of the basic political system that has shaped the world for the past several hundred years. If you were to look at the state of the British political sphere and the media, you wouldn't be able to tell that that was the case. But we can't understand racism in Britain without understanding white supremacy. Islamophobia is racialized in a particular way. Anti-Semitism is racialized in a particular way. But mainstream politics and media have made the dominant discourse center around white Jewish people at the cost of Jewish people of color. It's no accident that the combination of whiteness with being Jewish has been seized upon by people who don't care about Jewish communities. Whiteness is seen as a way of being neutral. I agree with Jenny's comments about the Ford Report, and the Ford Report, as we all know, found widespread Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and anti-blackness in the political sphere. Is anything going to be done about it? No. It's not politically expedient to meaningfully oppose racism. White supremacy makes racism an opportune tool for those who are looking to maintain the whiteness of the status quo. That's why it's so important to look at race and ethnicity alongside religion. It's broadly the case that one of the central functions of white supremacy is to make it so that racism is routinely disbelieved and denied, if the person experiencing the racism is racialized as a so-called minority. The Ford Report alleged that a hierarchy of racism exists, and that's difficult to deny. Writing in the Middle East Eye, Shireen Fernandez said, "We can't talk about dismantling racism without addressing how political parties and media outlets have perpetuated policies and myths that securitize racialized communities. We can't allow ourselves to be assuaged by the optics of diversity if we are to truly challenge racism in the workplace and beyond." The Ford Report confirms many suspicions and experiences that racialized groups already had, but which had been dismissed. It's time now to listen to those on the margins. Muslims in Britain have been made to feel through political messaging and policy decisions as though we are the enemies within. We're seen as targets that are worthy of suspicion, who are not fully British and who do not fully belong. All this is wrapped up in decades-long Orientalism and xenophobia that has white supremacy at its core. Another thing the Ford Report showed, however inadvertently, was that institutions like the Labour Party and politics at large are not interested in meaningfully tackling these types of racism. There's no need to state this politely. The Labour Party no longer stands for the working classes, and it has shown time and time again that it has embraced white supremacy through refusing to meaningfully tackle Islamophobia. Racial literacy in many political and media circles is woeful. Muslim writers have spent far too long patiently explaining what it is and how it functions in this country. but it's where we find ourselves again and again. And one of the people who does a great job of explaining how we define Islamophobia is Salman Saeed, who said, more than an expression of hatred or fear, Islamophobia needs to be understood as an undermining of the ability of Muslims as Muslims to project themselves into the future. Islamophobia, basically what he's saying, is a threat to life. Not just a threat to death, but also a threat to life, quality of life in every conceivable way. So he goes on to say, the manners in which Islamophobia is expressed and made manifest are diverse. This makes it difficult to say that Islamophobia has one specific feature that's hidden behind various occurrences. There is no essence to it, instead there are overlapping elements. It's possible to see how a gesture, a speech, and a police action can all be aspects of Islamophobia. So here, Saeed is showing how Islamophobia doesn't hinge upon an understanding of who makes up a Muslim as a singular entity. Islamophobia is not one single thing. Just as white supremacy is not only white people running around in hoods, Islamophobia is not one single aggression. Instead, it's a heavily surveilled community. It's the monitoring of children in the name of prevent. It's police harassment, but it's so much more. It's broader policy decisions that punish Muslims abroad, and it's the overarching narrative that Muslims are not to be trusted. In other words, it's a world-building narrative. The cost to Muslims of Islamophobia is serious and deep-seated. It's not something that can be escaped, and it must be confronted. That's exactly why white supremacy, at its essence, is the work of death. It orders our societies and controls the lives and deaths of groups of people. Political systems don't care about Islamophobia, but we must care as individuals. As the mess described in the Ford report shows, expecting political systems to change or for mainstream media to provide better coverage of racism, we're going to be waiting a long time. It's on those of us who are actually anti-racist to commit to dismantling Islamophobic systems and supporting independent media that challenges these harmful narratives. Somebody whose work is really influential and seminal for these types of discussions is Edward Said, who, in covering Islam way back, I think maybe late 80s, he said, far from challenging the vulgar stereotypes circulated in the media, the academic experts on Islam are as a body neutralized in their isolated, immediately functional role. And I would note here that when he's talking about experts in Islam, he is talking about white, non-Muslim, Western experts. He says that they function as status symbols of a relevant authority on Islam, and they're dependent on the whole system constituting and legitimating their function within it. It is this system which the media, in their reliance upon stereotypes based on fear and ignorance, reflect. A lack of critical thinking has become the hallmark of many works produced on understanding Islam. The uncritical treatment of knowledge production and the types of communities this protects and sustains is central to the reproduction of stereotypes and restrictive thinking. Saeed's analysis is, as ever, pertinent and astute reminder of the role of the media. The media has a duty to challenge the discourse coming out of Parliament. As we all know, that relationship is barely worth the paper that it's printed on. Hierarchies of racism mean that Islamophobia is often forgotten about or not deemed worthy of opposition. It's crucial that we can name white supremacy as the root of these issues. Hierarchies of racism are not politically neutral, and nor is resisting an increasingly Islamophobic state and media. To resist Islamophobia is to resist white supremacy. So I'll finish with another quote from Saeed when he said, underlying every interpretation of other cultures, especially of Islam, is the choice facing the individual scholar or intellectual, whether to put intellect at the service of power or at the service of criticism, community, and moral sense.
Thank you. And it's shaming that we need a crash course in this. I mean, this is stuff that we should all be understanding and know. Thank you very much. So how we're going to do it is we'll take 3 questions at a time, and the questioners could move to where Glyn is now sitting. If they've got discomfort in moving, he will manage to get the microphone. So could we take, and Alison too, if you can carry it this far. Can we have three questions? 3 questioners to come up here. Thank you.
That was really interesting, Maryam. Thank you. Here we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Maryam. It's a very quick question. Would we be able to get the text of what you just said? Or is it being recorded, and will it be? Because I found that so much in there, and you speak with such understanding from your own experience, but for us, or for me, there was a lot of new things to take on board, and I'd really like to get the text of that, please. Thank you.
Okay, can we answer that straight away? The talk is being live streamed, and can I pass it to Maryam to ask her whether she would mind electronically passing us the speech?
Yes, so it's going to be published in the Canary on Wednesday, so if anyone wants to read it, we can read it there.
Right, some other questions, and as it is a panel, it can also be discussion as well, putting your point of view, but good. Oh.
I'm not sure how to frame this question, but I was in the exhibition hall this afternoon and got talking to some other people who were at the conference, and it became apparent to me that the Labour Party is not really aware of what happens in the left-wing Jewish community. They don't really understand us. And what makes it worse is people like David Baddiel writing books about how Jews don't count is actually highlighting an issue which is a non-issue. And I wonder how the panel can, approach the question of how the public feels about Jews, and especially not, socialist Jews. Because I had this conversation in the exhibition hall with somebody talking about whether Jews should be included in the socialist societies of the Labour Party. And he said, well, we've got that, we've got JLM. And, there needs to be publicity about what the difference is between JLM and JVL. I'm sorry to say that our voice is not being heard.
Okay, thank you. Well, hold on to that one. And can we have another couple of questions?
Could you come up?
Oh.
Restriction of the lead.
2 and 3.
Okay.
Two. Okay. Well, the full.
Let's stand up and look at
Oh, sorry. Okay. Well, the full title of JVL is Jewish Voice for Labour, and there's always been a bit of ambiguity about that. But it was formed at a time to be to show sort of commitment to the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn. I'm wondering, having seen the high number of people who've been suspended or excluded, especially in the last week, what the strategy is going to be, or whether people have discussed whether JVL will continue to be linked to the Labour Party. I mean, I think a very high proportion of officers of the Labour Party have been either suspended or investigated or expelled. So I think it's a very complicated relationship, and I'd like a bit more discussion about that.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm someone who was suspended on last Wednesday. Okay. So what I want to say is about the context of the British Empire. So many Muslim workers who came to the empire from, for instance, Bangladesh and India, came into the textile factories in the north to work. And the legacy of the British Empire, I think, is the context in which we have still a massive impact on all forms of racism that exist. And I particularly think about Eric Williams, who became Prime Minister of Trinidad, and he was, I think, one of the first to say, well, no, the British Empire was not beneficial for workers, which is what the British aristocracy, of course, believe. It was absolutely destructive of the empire. And he said when employers see a worker coming into the factory, they don't see a human being, they see how much profit they're going to make. And therefore racism is an essential tool of that. Division of workers fighting each other. And not just black workers, but for instance Irish workers who were demonized all throughout history. So I think we also need to understand Islamophobia and all those forms of racism in that context. Jewish racism goes back further than the empire. It goes back to Jesus, really, and post-Jesus and the Catholic Church, etc. It's a bit of a different history, but it still serves to divide and rule. So I was very interested in what Maryam had to say about that. Thank you.
So yes. Okay, yes. I think what we'll do now is, everybody, including myself for this purpose, can comment on any of the questions. So number one, let me pass it to you first. Yes. And I might say something too.
I want to be very, very brief because I really want to give it back to Maryam.
Yeah.
So really, this question of people having no idea about left-wing Jews, watch the Al Jazeera programmes. Honestly, we don't want to spend tonight telling everybody the history of left-wing, blah, blah, blah. I think it would be a mistake, a waste of our time tonight to do that. I don't want to denigrate Mika's question. We do have to think about JVL's role in the future, but join JVL and take part in our strategy review, and that's how we'll answer that question. On the question about empire from Pam is very good, but can I just say, the Labour Party, in its early days, used to regard the empire as a civilising mission. Let's not pretend it was just conservative ideologues who had that view.
Okay, so I'm going to come. I just thought we ought to, yes. So I don't want to minimise the question that was put either about David Baddiel, and I don't want to. I haven't read the book. It's a worrying concept, Jews don't count, because it would be unfair on him and other Jews who feel that in some way or other anti-Semitism is being ignored. Many people do face it, but I'm going to do what Naomi says and say that those three films will give a portrait of left-wing Jews. And we've tried to publicise this, we have. And I still can't understand why, because I keep the numbers, why as the numbers have gone up to now, I know of 56 Jews investigated, and of course there'll be many I don't know about, how this isn't a big story. I mean, it's utterly mad. Just imagine there were 56 Muslims accused by the Tory party of Islamophobia. It's unimaginable. I mean, it's crazy. It is, and I hear my mother's voice saying, are these people mad? Are they absolutely mad? And I also want to move on. As to the JVL, I mean, actually, Mika, this is the million-dollar question, and we spend all our time disagreeing about this. What do we do next? There are quite a lot of our officers who have actually left the party or been expelled, but they still think it's important to work within the Labour Party where you can. And I don't myself want to change the name ever, because actually it's a nuisance changing your name. People don't. And Labour can, as Glyn has pointed out, Labour can mean labour, as in hard work. But I wanted just to say that we don't have much contact these days with the parliamentary Labour Party, but we do have some. We do have some avenues. There are some issues where there has been a small rebellion. If we have no contact connection with the party anymore at all, we lose that small bit of influence, which I think is important. Now I want to move on now to the very important third question for you.
Yeah, thank you for your question. I feel like it's worth pointing out that...
Oh, so sorry. Before you go on, I'm so sorry. I was passed an important message. Can I remind members not to take photos of each other? Sorry, whoever gave me that reminder. Thank you. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, sorry. British colonialism predates a lot of things, and we cannot understand the current moment without understanding British colonialism. It's not taught in our schools, it's actively covered up, and that undeniably has an impact on how people behave in public and how people behave in the political sphere. The thing to remember here also is that so many regimes have taken their tactics from the British Empire. So Nazism, for example, learnt a lot from British strategies and British functions of colonialism. That has undeniably shaped the modern world. It's an absolute disgrace that this country insists on covering up its colonial history. This country would not be what it is, it would not have what it has without its colonial history. And for the Labour Party, of all parties, to run around and deny that is just an absolute farce. And it shows that they are not having any meaningful opposition, and this is something myself and Naomi were talking about earlier, where it's more important than ever that people consider work that they do in their own communities, whether that's mutual aid or existing in a community and campaigning locally and keeping an eye on policies nationally, that we begin to think of that work outside of the political system. This political system will not save us because it is the direct product of British colonialism. We can't reform it, it needs to be burnt down.
I'm going to use my privilege as chair just to ask you one question. Peter Oborne's book, which I'm reading but haven't finished yet, which is called The Fate of Abraham. I heard him speaking about it and about the book, and I haven't got to that bit of it yet, but his view was that the end of the Cold War coincided with the acceleration of Islamophobia. Now, that doesn't fit terribly with what you're saying, unless... Can you square that circle for me?
He's wrong. Cold War politics hasn't gone anywhere. It's maybe not as prominent as it was in the same way. I think one of the reasons that Cold War politics at the time was successful was because it's very prominent in films, literature, in the media. It generally is now. Islamophobia is not something that was invented with 9/11. So the tropes that you see about Muslims, whether that's in film, literature, TV, or whatever, are just as politically potent as the tropes that you see about Muslims coming from Prevent guidance or whatever. So that's why it needs to be dismantled on all of these different fronts. The Cold War may wane in terms of cultural relevance, but it politically always had an influence in our lifetimes. And it's the same with Islamophobia. You can go back as long as you like, and it still is going to have its roots in decades and decades long worth of Orientalism.
Thank you. I may have, as I haven't got to that bit of the book, I may have got it wrong. Okay, it's a very good book, though. Yes, Glyn got a question, or yeah, contribution from Glyn, and two other people. Jonathan, come up, and a third person want to come up. Please come. So the three of you, here you are.
Which one did you want to say?
Oh, whichever. You start.
If we look at our placard, Jewish Voice for Labour, always with the oppressed, never with the oppressor. I just want to point out some areas that are developing now in this country, which are having immense impact on poor people. We have a situation where 40 million people are forced to make the choice between heating and eating, and we haven't even got to the winter yet. We have, and this is going to impact very differentially on the population. Just as COVID did, it's going to impact minorities much harder than the general population. So racial minorities, disabled people, and so on are going to be hit harder and harder on this. I was at a Stop the War meeting last night where people were talking about the degree to which British expense on armaments to Ukraine has exponentially risen. That is now, the level is at the highest that it has ever been, the government placing arms contracts higher than ever before, and we have a crisis of poverty in the country, we have a crisis in the health service, and this is going to impact people differentially, as I said. And so the fight against the war in Ukraine, the fight against austerity, the fight against this government's shifting of wealth from the poor to the rich. You don't benefit from those changes in tax unless you're earning over 150,000 a year. The top, if you're earning £1 million a year, you actually get an extra £150,000. We have this obscenity, and it impacts on us in a way that we haven't actually felt yet in the political sphere. And where is the Labour Party on this? The silence and the ducking of these issues by Starmer and that leadership is itself morally criminal. And I think that our role as Jewish Voice for Labour, as a socialist Jewish organisation, is to do what we can to make these issues important politically, to make those connections. And we know that if these issues are not addressed by a political party, and if they're not addressed by the Labour movement, and if the Labour movement is not going to take control politically in this field of poverty and suffering, well, we know who will. It'll be the extreme right. So we have, as socialist Jews, a really important responsibility here.
Thank you. I haven't been asking people to introduce themselves in case by any chance they didn't want to for the tape, but do start introducing yourself if you want to. And do some people come who I don't know come and talk to, because otherwise it'll look a bit internal. Jonathan.
I'm Secretary of Jewish Voice for Labour.
Okay, Jonathan Rosenhead, also on the Executive Committee of Jewish Voice for Labour. I think it's bad planning, we shouldn't have gone one after each other. I'm suspended for 18 months, about halfway through that suspension. The condition for my getting back into regular membership is that I undertake a course of training in anti-Semitism. I'm not quite sure I'm actually going to do that, but we will see. There's nothing special about Jews in this political sphere. We're only special, we've only been called into being as an organisation because anti-Semitism was weaponized as it was, and to defeat the left. So we are Jews who are on the left, and we've had to come together to call out lies when we see them. I'd like to apologise for not saying too much or anything about Islamophobia, but when we called this meeting, we didn't even know that Naomi would be elected, let alone that she would then be kicked off the NEC in this way. So that is at the top of my mind. The title of our meeting is The Wrong Sort of Party. And that is what I really want to talk to. It's a joke because we are called the wrong sort of Jews. But we think we're the right sort of Jews in the wrong sort of party. I would think it's hard to resist the conclusion that for our generation, well, my generation is older than before most anybody else in the room, but for the generations represented here, or for the next generation, which is 25 years, the Labour Party is a hopeless place for the left. The thoroughness of the expunging of the socialist strand within the Labour Party is such that to recoup anything of what we've lost is hard to conceive of. All right, let's say it's 10 years, but 10 years is a lifetime in politics, and I don't see that happening. So the question is what we do then. We have a Labour Party which is incapable of developing the radical change which is needed to make this country the sort of one we would like to live in. There are, I think, more options than the ones that Naomi suggested. And I think there is a potential, she suggested, in grassroots campaigns and a potential in industrial struggles. But that gets us very little or no way without a political program, a sense of direction. Otherwise we will win local skirmishes, but we will continue to lose the war. And I think that we need to look for where is the potential is that to come from. I don't see it coming from the Labour Party. I think we have to think about a new focus of left activity outside the Labour Party, but not excluding Labour Party members who want to be part of it, including all the Labour Party members who have been milling around in a disappointed faction, not knowing what to do, including the organisations which came together so effectively and harmoniously to support Naomi's candidature. 13 left organisations. Only one, whose name begins with M, was not part of that programme. I think that we have a potential. It needs to be joined to a radical potential in the unions for us to have a practical proposition. Thank you. Not a question.
Thank you very much. Okay. Yeah, I'm Jo Bird. Congratulations to Naomi for doing what I was not able to do, which is join the NEC as a Jewish person, backed by Jewish Voice for Labour. I stood 2 times for the NEC, didn't make it, but it was a brilliant experience and helped also to unite the left, I think, within the party. And this, like Jonathan was saying, this meeting, I think, confirms again to me that the Labour Party is the wrong sort of party. The Labour Party leadership don't want us. They don't want people like me and you, everyone who put their hand up, me included, for being investigated, suspended, disciplined, having our membership terminated. The Labour Party expels the Jews. How can you get more anti-Semitic than that? You know, it blames the Jews for the situation that the party finds itself in. It's devastating. It's really sad. The hope that we had years ago has gone. It's buried. Labour First are tweeting about how they're going to slam the door for good. You know, Labour is the wrong sort of party. We've been told this message many, many times, and that only, you know, my expulsion confirmed it for me. And partly I'd got to the point where, you know, on the whole wave of enthusiasm with Corbyn and what he represented, the manifesto, everything we believed in was so fantastic. And then I end up as a councillor elected under a Labour banner, and I was like, oh, sugar, what am I going to do now in this situation where support is just dissipating and I'm being attacked by my own party over and over again? You know, so in some ways it was a relief to be expelled. And I spent a lot of time reflecting and considering, looking around, what do I do next? I'm a politician. I'm elected to represent my community, and who is doing that in a good way? Who can I join forces with collectively to do that together with? And in Wirral, it's the Green Party. The Green Party voted to save libraries in my constituency rather than the Tory and Conservative parties who voted to close them. You know, the Green Party worked with me on pensions. The Green Party supports boycott, divestment and sanctions, you know, the signature issue for this country and for international affairs, and particularly for the left. It's a very strong policy on Israel and Palestine. Labour passed a policy 12 months ago and has completely ignored it. So, you know, that's my journey. The struggle continues in different ways and in different places, inside and outside the Green Party, inside and outside the Labour Party. But I do believe that the future, if we have one, it is green as well as red. And next year, I hope we can say Lashana Tova for 5783. Thank you very much.
Oh, good. Some more questions coming now. But I'm going to actually turn to Maryam, not to us on this, because I'd like to ask your view a bit about the politics of Islamophobia and the politics of anti-Semitism. I mean, you haven't talked about your particular political views, but do you want to? So what I mean is, what's your reaction to this criticism of the Labour Party that we're going in for? You want to pass?
I'll think about it.
Okay, pass. Okay, let's take some more contributions. Do come up, people, and if you wouldn't mind, move up here.
I think you were first.
Well, hello. My name is Roger Barley. I'm from Birmingham Labour Party, and I'm a bit old, so I'd just like to remind you that the 1945 general election was fought, having so-called won a terrible war with a wonderful leader, but they were beaten by the Labour Party. And that is very important. 1945, the Labour Party had one of the biggest majorities it's ever had. And I must say that they also instigated the running down, the destruction, if you like, of the empire. We did that. And so you cannot say some of the things you've said about the Labour Party. You've got to look at the past. And if I jump through many, many years, I've been active in the left of the party since about 1975. And we're still there. The left wing is still there, very strong. And if we destroy the Labour Party, we'll be destroying an excellent voice in left-wing things. I love JVL, and I hope it remains the Labour Party, and that you add to the decisions that are made to get fairness. It isn't only Jews who have been sent out, it's left-wingers that they're after. And of course I've lived through Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, and so on and so on. And the argument always is that we've got to win an election. I saw it coming through Starmer today, and they're all saying it, and they've been all told to say we must have a Labour government and so on, as if it's a record. But at the end of the day, in this country, you will not, I don't think, successfully start to form another socialist party. You've got a socialist party where there's a goodly number of us who are socialists, and the peak of this century will have been Jeremy's election as the leader. And I'll just tell you one more thing, that me and one or two others were instrumental in getting the Labour Party leader elected by the members. You wouldn't believe, some of you might not know this, but you wouldn't believe that up until about 1974, the leader of the Labour Party was elected by the MPs and the Lords. And we fought that, particularly with the campaign for Labour Party democracy. We campaigned on that through from 74, and eventually I put a resolution to the conference in about 1989, I think it was, that's right, 1989, to say that we should have the leader elected by the members. And then Tony Benn was backing that, of course. That went to a meeting a special conference in 1980, and we agreed on the method of leadership then, which was a bit of a compromise there, but that has been improved. Jeremy was elected by the vast number of the members. Unfortunately, so was Starmer. That's why I stay in the party. But it's not the members. It is, I often blame, and I've been criticised time and time again, I blame the Daily Mail, the Daily Telegraph, and all the rest of them. The only paper that tells the truth about what's going on in politics is the Morning Star. Thank you.
Hi, Talal Hungari, a proud Solidarity member of JVL. I just want to begin by saying how appalled I am at the way Naomi has been treated at her suspension by the Labour Party. But I think it's great that we can continue to have these meetings and continue to talk about the important issues that face us. When I see Labour Party members being suspended, expelled, for attending the wrong meeting, going to the wrong meeting, I think about the fact that there are members of the shadow cabinet today who voted to go to war in Iraq and left thousands upon thousands of Arabs dead. What does Labour's disciplinary system have to say about that? Nothing. I mean, I think about the fact that in the Labour Party, you're permitted to support arms sales to Saudi Arabia and Israel, but try criticizing NATO and you're out. I mean, what does that say about the way the Labour Party thinks about Arab life, about Muslim life? It's a non-issue in the Labour Party. It's not taken without serious. I wouldn't even say it's not taken seriously. It's just not even taken. It's not an issue. And so I'd be glad to hear you comment on that, if you would.
I haven't got a very big comment to make, but I think we have a very special speaker here today. And I think, you know, if JVL is really going to be serious about racism, we have to know how many people who, with a Muslim faith, people of African origin, how many of them have been expelled? And until we know that, I think we can't really talk seriously about addressing racism. Otherwise, we will just be talking about anti-Semitism, and that's, I think we need to have that sort of figure to go forward.
Hi, okay. Tony Norbury, I just wanted to, I was in the CLP, back in that CLP, I was suspended once, then suspended again, then expelled. So they had 3 goes at me. But what I wanted to mention was stuff that was touched on before about the wider Labour movement, the trade union movement, and the relationship with the Labour Party, and that relationship as it goes on now. Because I think the Labour Party is making itself unelectable because it's disenfranchised itself from the Labour movement. So it no longer represents Labour. That's where the name came from, of the Labour Party, to represent Labour, organised Labour, and it doesn't do that anymore. So I think it's lost the name Labour and become a right-wing party, unfortunately. And I'm talking about a party I was in for 30, 40 years, you know. Joined it as a young trade unionist, as a shop steward from Vauxhalls, joined the Labour Party, fought for people like Lol Duffy and Wallasey, MPs like that. But the fundamental thing that's happened for me is I went through all the Blair years and all the other years, but we had a right in the Labour Party and we had a left in the Labour Party. And we, on the left, through the trade union movement, if you like, would put motions through CLPs. And if they won, they won, and if they didn't, they didn't. You had a debate, a democratic debate, and you engage with the members. You can't do that anymore in the Labour Party. They've tried to shut us up. They've tried to shut us up about the state of Israel and their disgusting treatment of Palestinian people. They've tried to shut us up by sending motions through CLPs on anything that the right wing don't like. And they've done that by changing the rules. They've changed the rules of engagement. We never did that when we were fighting on the left. We used the rules. We did it in a fair and democratic way. No longer is the Labour Party a fair and democratic party until it gets rid of the present leadership. The present leadership is holding the Labour Party back. As Len McCluskey once said, for the Labour Party to fly and be electable, it needs 2 wings. It needs the right and the left. And without them 2 wings, and it's always had them, it will never fly. I think someone touched on it before. The Parliamentary Labour Party never, ever, ever wanted Jeremy Corbyn elected as a leader. But the members did. And the members joined in their hundreds of thousands. And we all remember the massive public meetings, something we'd never seen before. Nearly hundreds of thousands of people turning up to see Jeremy. One of the ones I was most proud about was West Kirby Beach, and the chant came from Tranmere Rovers, where the concert was on the same day. Oh, Jeremy Corbyn. And that's where the chant came from. I'm so proud that came from Wirral. And we had so much excitement that Jeremy was going to be elected in 2017. But little did we know, and it's been revealed now on the Al Jazeera's programmes, that the cowards and the traitors who were in the Labour Party working against us, they weren't even elected members. They were paid by us, the members. and they were cowards and traitors working against us. We would have won that election if it wasn't for them sabotaging the Labour Party. And that's how far they went in changing the rules. They changed the rules to suit themselves. So I just wanted to say, from my experience, that was the biggest thing for me, that the Labour Party decided to have no rules. And when you've got no rules, you become a rabble. And that's what the Labour Party is looking like now to the electorate. Looks like a rabble. Thank you.
I'm very glad that, I'll come back to Richard in a minute, that somebody said, I can't remember who, that it's not just the Jews who've been accused. Of course it's not. And the suffering of non-Jews, with some exceptions both ways, seems to me worse, because I've had people say to me, you know, I've never thought of this. Could I be? Now, we all know this is nonsense, you know. Us Jews, we know that this is a nonsense, wicked allegation. But it can be life, you know, destroying, literally destroying. And a very important question about, we don't know how many black people have been expelled. Certainly so far, anecdotal evidence suggests it's higher than the average, that black people on the left are probably have been targeted, but we should find out those figures. Now, there was a question for you. Can you remember what it was?
Yes.
Well
yes, the person in the suit, I think, made a brilliant set of comments, and I feel like what they were describing was modern colonialism. Money talks, and the way in which the British state is able to use consent and power through the British electorate to support arms trades in Saudi Arabia and Yemen. They have blood on their hands. They're using that money in order to kill Arabs. They will continue to do that, and it's a fundamental part of their politics and who they are. So again, I think it goes back to what I said earlier, that that's not a system that you can reform. That when you have a system that believes that Arab lives must be destroyed in every possible way. It keeps happening year after year after year. Palestine is bombed every summer. Yemen is still being destroyed. The Saudis are propping that up. It's everything that we've discussed here today is happening on a global scale, because that is the nature of the world now. And I think it's telling that when we talk about grassroots organizing and how do you find collectivity and how do you come together if you can't come together under the banner of the Labour Party, I think it's really, really important to remember that even though we might have single issue solidarity on something, that is more powerful in being able to connect those dots and think, well, what is my worldview? How do I see this coming together? Who can I stand in community with on this issue? And it takes a lot of resilience and perseverance, but I think it's worth it, especially when we're considering the quality of life and how death happens in that type of grassroots organising.
Thank you. So we've got Richard, and because we started late, I'm going to go on till 8:10. Is there anybody else would like to come up? I can see several people. Well, we will finish at 10 past, because people are going on to other fringes as well, I know.
Hello, thanks, Jenny. I want to make a number of disparate comments. Really to say, I mean, there's an enormous amount of richness and range in what people have brought up. And I want to add a little more to it. I want to say, first of all, within the Jewish community, we do have organizations like the Jewish Council for Racial Equality, which on this issue have been very, very good, maybe liberal in their orientation, but providing really hard-hitting information, campaigning on asylum seekers, providing information, spearheading some of the campaigning against deportations to Rwanda and elsewhere, drawing on the Jewish experience of being victims, of being exiles, of having nowhere to go. And that collective memory is something which I think it's very important for us to draw on in our campaigning. We must not shut ourselves off from other sections of the Jewish community, even when they try to shut us out as being the wrong sort of Jews. We have constantly got to draw on and emphasize those elements of progressive Jewish politics which can resonate with other people in the numerous diverse Jewish communities in Britain which make up a whole range of different views, not just those the Board of Deputies of British Jews care to speak for. But even within that, many of them on this kind of issue can be approached, can be mobilized, and we have to reach out to them. The sectarianism does not come from us, it comes from them, and we must refuse that sectarianism. Equally, when it comes to the issues of in or out of the Labour Party or whatever, I'm in the Labour Party, I'm still in the Labour Party, I'm an I'm guilty of undermining the party's ability to fight racism, anti-Semitism, but I just got a slap over the knuckles. Nothing else happened to me. I'm in the Labour Party till they throw me out. But there are many people who have been thrown out with whom we must continue to work, and it's no good saying to them, go into the Labour Party. That's the vehicle for change. That's saying to them, do nothing for the rest of your lives politically. No, we have got to work with them. We have got to build bridges between people inside and outside the Labour Party, and it's pretty terrible at the moment inside the Labour Party. Keir Starmer happens to be my MP. It's not the most delightful constituency party to be in. It's not altogether the most progressive. Nevertheless, we do what we can, where we can, but we have to acknowledge the large numbers of people who are no longer in the Labour Party, partly because they can't stand it, partly because they have been excluded. And Jewish Voice for Labour has to be the voice of all those people in the broadest sense of the labour movement. And our orientation has to be towards those in the unions who are going to be attacked for supporting Palestinian rights, just as those in the party have been attacked for supporting Palestinian rights. The unions have been the bastion of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. Without them last year, that magnificent motion at conference would not have been passed. They are going to feel the brunt of the attack, and we need to be there, defending them, working with them, opposing anti-Semitism wherever it occurs, but not allowing criticism of Israel to be conflated with anti-Semitism and people destroyed because they put a comma out of place in a comment they make in a moment of anger. We've got to understand that if you want to find racism of any kind, you cannot draw a line and say, you stepped over this line, you used that word, you whatever. You have to argue with people, you have to discuss with people, you have to have an open-minded political culture. And read the Ford report and read what Ford says about the culture of the Labour Party. It's nothing to do with anti-Semitism, Jews, or whatever. He says the culture of the Labour Party is rotten, rotten to the core. If the party is serious, Keir Starmer, having paid Martin Ford to produce a report, will read the goddamn thing and will look at the recommendations and will reform the party. And it's not about this or that or the other minor thing. It's about the whole orientation to what politics is, to how people communicate and work together, and a really genuinely diverse, integrated Labour Party will be one in which racism is dealt with systematically, consistently, across all issues and all racisms, and people will be encouraged to reflect and think and change and become broader human people rather than the narrow, vindictive regime which we are suffering under at the moment. Thank you.
Kevin Stannard, I'm a member of the Labour Party as well. So I've got two different points to two speakers. So the first one, but they're both connected, because I think I want to go back to a couple of weeks ago when somebody snuffed it, and the state came out with all its pomp and circumstances and militarism, and I was, God, the TV everywhere, it was everywhere, and I thought, all those people queuing, am I somewhere off the radar in this? And then there's a thing on Radio 4 which I call fascist phoning, which is they have an equivalent to any questions and then they have any answers, and the any answers are normally right-wingers. And people came on there and they were talking critically of all this BBC rubbish that had been generated and questioning a lot of stuff. And I thought, okay, that's really good. And then I heard about Starmer and the singing of the national anthem. And I thought, what the bloody hell am I going to do? I don't want to stand up and sing the national anthem. Why are they doing it? He's doing it for the same reason he stuck a Union Jack at the back of the platform to peddle nationalism, which we don't need wonderful... Okay. To cut a long story short then, my question was, what was I going to do? And I'm a left person in the Labour Party, and I went to a Momentum briefing, and Momentum decided they weren't going to do anything about the singing of the national anthem because they didn't want to, they thought it was wasting the energy and the wrong focus. I was thinking, okay, I could stand up with a blank piece of paper, and then I heard about Naomi. And I thought, oh, that's a good idea. I'm not going to stand up with a blank piece of paper. I'm going to stand up with a piece of paper saying Naomi on it. I bottled it. I bottled it because I didn't know anybody else who was going to be doing the same thing. And that's part of my issue, which is the left in the Labour Party are really struggling to find out how to work together. They're not working together, as people talk about M and all that sort of stuff. Okay. So I'd like you to come back on that. The question I wanted to put back was to rephrase what Jenny was asking, which is, apart from burning it or chucking it away, have you got any recommendations about what the Labour Party should be doing with regards to Islamophobia that they could be doing now? If they could?
Can I? So have a woman. Thank you very much. I'm allowed on because I'm a woman. I just hold it. Yeah, just hold it. Yeah, okay.
No, it's fine. We want to get everybody in as quickly as possible.
I'll be as quick as I can. Okay, I'm Councillor Jackie Nangrieve. I was suspended for being anti-Semitic last year. They're going to let me back in December. Great. But I'm going to be retrained, so I'm not going to be anti-Semitic anymore. It is quite... The thing is, I look at the Conservative Party and they are descending into fascism, it seems to me. And I jumped aboard the vehicle of the Labour Party when socialism ripped through like a wildfire through the party. I jumped on the wildfire with everybody else. And that fire's gone out. So what do we now... How do we fight the coming storm? Because the Conservatives are going to kill us. You know, us working people. They're not interested in us working people, whether you're Jewish or Muslim or Hindu even. They don't care about us. They're going to rip through us, and our vehicle has collapsed. So, is it dead, or can we resurrect it, or can we resurrect parts of it? Now, I do know, if you look at the Ford report bits and stuff like that, there are all these backwaters. I mean, the Labour Party is like Gormenghast. Every time you turn a corner, there's something else to discover that you didn't realise, and piles of people on committees and committees that you didn't know were controlling this, that and the other. I feel we need to bed down and get into those nooks and crannies inside the party. We need to go to region and find out where that committee is. And we had a slate for region, didn't we, Helen? We had a slate. We were going to go there. What did they do? They cancelled the vote. Okay, so what we need to do is to go back. So I think we need to get in there, fight, and get into the nooks and crannies, because otherwise we're lost. Sorry.
Three things in 5 seconds. Firstly, what should JVL do? I hope it continues. I think you've been a heroic beacon of hope in the last 5 years. Above all, I think it's so important that there is a historical record of this struggle, because it will be extremely important for future generations. But on the Labour Party, I want to challenge one thing that was said, that the Labour Party brought about the end of the British Empire. I'm sorry, it prosecuted a war in Malaysia. It was deeply implicated in the violence of the British Empire. On the Labour Party, do we stay in or do we go? I'm no longer a member. I joined because I thought we had the best opportunity in my lifetime. I always felt contempt for the Labour Party, I must be honest, and I joined because of a number of things. We had a leader who was honest and principled, who was not a careerist, which is extremely unusual for a Labour MP. We had a massive influx of people joining on the back of Jeremy Corbyn, but also on the back of deep disillusion with being disenfranchised. And we had this huge explosion. We had ideas. We had a limited reformist programme. We had vastly greater numbers in the CLPs. We had a right wing in the Labour Party bereft of ideas. And yet we lost. We lost. And we lost because the Labour Party is completely sclerotic and corrupt. And my experience is that it's unreformable. And we have to look, comrades, beyond the Labour Party to all the fragments, all the many fine people that have drifted away, been expelled, all the other small fragments, and we need to bring those together. But, yeah, that's it.
Sorry?
Me?
Yes.
Okay, I will be quick. The Labour Party is unreformable. This country, never mind the Labour Party, this country is institutionally racist. And we need to accept that, and we need to try to do something about it. The political wing of the working class is useless. We've been talking about it for hundreds of years. We had the diggers, we had the levellers, we had the Chartists, and they all spoke well, and they all had good ideas, and they were stabbed in the back, and they were let down by the leaders. We need to do more than talk. We need to change. The whole system needs pulling down, and we need something different. Full stop.
Hello. This is my first time to Liverpool. I just want to make a quick observation that I've been really, impressed by all the grand buildings and all the statues of men in military uniform on horseback. I wonder what that's all about. But my point was about, I'm Jewish and a member of the Jewish Voice for Labour, and on the recommendation of the Jewish Voice for Labour, I bought Anthony Lerman's book, What Has Become of Anti-Semitism. I'm about a third of the way through it, and I realise I don't know anything. I don't know what Zionism is. Is it an ideology about a Jewish state, just like that, or is it for all the Jews, or all the Jews that want to go to Israel? I mean, I don't want to go to Israel, but is it for me? I don't know what Zionism is. I didn't realise that anti-Semitism has changed over the last 40 years, and it has been an effort of people all around the world, from in Israel, in America, everywhere, to actually move away from what it used to be, which was just hatred of Jews, quite simple, to being Israel is the collective Jew of nations. And that is, people don't know this. I didn't know this. Jewish people don't know this. My friends who aren't Jewish, who used to think it was all about Jews, now They won't talk about Israel anymore. It's sort of seeped into people. It is really, really insidious, and I don't know what to do about it. How do I communicate it? If I start communicating, I'm in the Labour Party, my God, I don't know how long for. I'm not going to tell you my status. It's confidential. Oh, do you know what I mean? Do you know my... Oh, yes, I'll come. Yeah. Okay, but it's really the sort of question, how do we communicate it? And I don't know what the answer is, but I'm going to finish the book. I recommend the book, Anti-Lerman, what is it called? Whatever happened to anti-Semitism over there. Okay, thank you.
Jenny?
Jeremy Hawthorne from Riverside Labour Party, sorry? Yeah. From the home patch here, Riverside constituency was, I think, the second constituency to affiliate to JVL when the original sort of formation happened. And it was a case of, if JVL did not exist, it would be necessary to create it. And it was necessary to create it, and it happened. And if there's one word in that forward report that must give the heebie-jeebies to Starmer and Co., which is the word communities, plural. Jewish communities, plural. Because the whole sort of bash over the head for Palestine we've been given over the long time has been in the name of the Jewish community, a complete perversion of your tradition. I don't speak from the Jewish tradition, I'm a Christian by origin, I'll tell you about that in a second. But in a sense, you guys have done what the liberation theology has done to the Christian church, which is to give a left articulation to the tradition. It's most important. So it's congratulations in a sense, and please don't stop doing it. The second thing, and there's one more, the second thing is that having spent a day on the Palestine Solidarity stall yesterday in the conference centre, before they rumbled that I was a suspended member and threw me out today, the Naomi experience, the number of people who would come up and show a lot of support for international justice and peace of the Palestinians, etc., is not worth writing off in the climate we've got. It's bad at the top, but actually at the bottom, it ain't that bad. There's a lot of support there. So, in a sense, if you're talking about the merits of the Labour Party, do not write that off. Last point, quickly, is this, and it has to do with Islamophobia. The problem for the Labour Party, actually, this next time, is not going to be the anti-Semitism. It's going to be whether they've alienated enough Muslims or not. Yeah. Now, I'm wondering whether JVO could actually have some sort of dialogue with the Labour Muslim Network, because they have produced reports about Islamophobia. I've read them. They're not actually terribly detailed. But I think there might be room for dialogue there, because the same issue is going to happen within what we might call the Muslim community, which anyone who's Muslim might think, well, I'm not part of that. So the same issue may well open up, and I think the dialogue between somebody like Labour Muslim Network will probably be of assistance, and that's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Two matters of business. There was a question to you, Maryam. It was about... Do you want to answer it? It was about Islamophobia in the Labour Party, I think. Anyway, I think, I'm sorry to that person who gave the question, but I think we've probably run out of energy, haven't we? Okay, two matters of business. To remind you again about the media briefing, anybody who actually is a delegate, can you come and collect one of these and deliver it to the BBC stand or the, I don't know if there's an ITV stand, Sky stand. Particularly Sky, actually, because their news last night was about how wonderfully coherent the Labour Party is now, with absolutely everybody happy and loving it. And the other thing is, I think we're going to have a request for money from Richard Cooper. Oh, sorry, did you want to...
must have a few more words from Maryam, no?
Well,
you're going to have a few more words from me then.
Oh, are you? Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, well, then if you do,
Are you sure, Maryam? Because, okay. All right. Look, sorry, I mean, some people have gone, I know, but I mean, this has been an incredibly rich discussion, and I know people have expressed anger and confusion and all sorts of things. I always love to hear from Richard Cooper because he expresses so eloquently the complexities of things, but with passion. He's always got that passion. I mean, there's so many things. I'll pick on just one, and it's about the question of how we actually tackle racism. Remember Shami Chakrabarti? Yes. She produced a report at Jeremy's behest which was rubbished by the enemies of the party at that time. She was accused of daring to look at anti-Semitism as a form of racism. We don't speak much to Shami, unfortunately, but I have spoken to her, and she said one of the things that makes her so angry and so... she has the feeling that she daren't touch these issues ever again, because she was trying to deal with racism and she was being abused because she didn't single out anti-Semitism as something special and different. And I think that's appalling. The question of education, how you tackle different forms of prejudice, as Richard said, it's got to be open through dialogue, through genuine understanding. And Ford says this. Ford actually says it's regrettable that Jewish Voice for Labour, and he names us, has not been invited to contribute its expertise in this area. And I really would like to talk to Maryam more, because one of the things that has been really so detrimental to having positive and open engagement about anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and other forms of racism and discrimination is the redefinition that our confused friend in the stripy shirt mentioned of anti-Semitism. It has been redefined, and we've been presented with this document which tells you what may or may not constitute anti-Semitism. And lo and behold, other groups, minoritized groups, have picked up on this as if it's some sort of model that they should follow. And this is because what's happened with I'm talking about the IHRA, International Holocaust. Basically, you've got a section of the multifarious Jewish communities in this country who's determined this thing, and everybody else is expected to abide by it or be damned. And now this is going to start happening with the Muslim communities. The Hindus have picked up on it, a certain strand, a very right-wing strand, have picked up on their own, and so on and so on. And this is really not helpful. So I'm going to have to stop. I'm sorry. There's been so much said, and usually you get to wrap up at the end. So I would have liked to hear from you again. Go on, Jenny. Jenny.
Right. Richard and the collection.
This is the bit you've all been. Sorry, this is the bit you've all been waiting for. JVL needs to survive. Everyone is agreed on that.
Can't go out unless you put money in the bucket.
And I'm being heckled from the back. We need money. We have legal fees to pay because of a court case we had to settle. We have our ordinary running expenses. We have the need to be able to respond to the new situation we face and to be able to carry out the essential task of working inside the Labour Party, outside the Labour Party, inside the trade unions, inside the communities, with other racialized minority groups in this country, with everything. We need to do what we've been doing, but we need to do more of it. And none of it can be done without money. So it's an urgent appeal. Everyone is short of money. As Glyn said, you have to choose between eating and heating, and we're saying to you, and giving money to JVL. But we need to get it so that we can take part in the campaigns that are desperately needed. And the fact of this awful Labour Party conference only emphasises the need for the kind of work we do to continue, for the non-sectarian approach we try to bring into politics on the left, for the commitment to anti-racism, which is, as I tried to say earlier, part of what has formed Jewish communities. Years, centuries and more of responding to oppression, of being the other, of having to work to survive, of having to find ways of being genuinely internationalist in the way they think about their problems and world problems. So I'm asking every one of you, please to give what you can. Folding money because it makes much less noise when the box is rattled. Whatever you can give. And for people who don't have cash on them, there are cards with Q codes. And everyone here will be well aware that with your mobile phones, you can point them at the Q codes, and lo and behold, you can get bank details and make a payment that way. Please give generously, because we are, not we as such, in dire circumstances. Our society is in dire circumstances. Our input is absolutely crucial, and without your contributions, we cannot and will not be able to do as much as needs to be done. Thank you very much. Can I also say, we have these little flags. They cost us a £5. You're very welcome to take them. Or a £5, or a tenner, if you prefer. And there are ones on the back table. And they're very, very useful with a little bamboo stick from your garden centre for carrying on demonstrations.
And one more announcement. Episode 3 of the Al Jazeera Files is not going to be televised tonight. They've got a technical hitch. And the media briefing. Anyone who's a delegate, please come. Thank you, Jenny.
I'm finished. Thank you very much, everybody. Buckets to collect the money on the way out, please.
And I've been reminded that every penny you give us now is being matched by a generous donor up to the amount of £50,000. So everything you give tonight will be doubled. Please give as generously as you can. Thank you very much.